All right, Kevin back with you for another episode of the Million Dollar Relationships Podcast. And today I'm here with Steve Woessner. Well, actually, Steve, do you prefer Steven or do you prefer Steve?
It kind of runs the gamut, so either is fine.
Okay. Well, we'll go with Steven since that's what I'm seeing there. But Steve, so great to have you on the show today.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I really appreciate that, and I look forward to our conversation.
Yes, same. You and I got to connect before, as I do with every guest that I
Mm.
invite on the show. And I want to start off by just giving a shout out to Corey Morris because I don't know what it was, what it felt like for you on the initial conversation that we had, Stephen, but I'll tell you, for me, it felt like you and I had already known each other for years because we got connected through Corey. And Corey is just one of those guys that, man, I love Corey. I love who he is. I love how he shows up. And anytime he says, Kev, you should talk with so and so, I'm just in. And so, how, I mean, I would imagine this wasn't the first time that Corey has connected you with somebody. I mean, what's it like for you when you get connected to somebody via somebody like Corey?
Yeah, I think it's good. I think it's always nice, and it's always nice to feel thought of. Um, you know, assuming that the introduction has been, relevant and all of
Yeah,
that. I mean, we've all
yeah,
probably received introductions before that was like, okay, well, why that one?
yeah, yeah.
Um, but that obviously was not the case here. And Corey is great. Corey is somebody who I've known for years. He's somebody who I trust. And we both run marketing agencies. We're both part of similar networks and groups and so forth. And I've been to Kansas City, and we've attended baseball. Or when my Cleveland Guardians went to play the Kansas City Royals, we
Okay,
went to that game together. And so
nice.
there's that context of
Yeah,
relationship. It's
yeah.
it's more than just like knowing of a person. It's when Corey introduces me to somebody, it's like, oh, okay, well that's awesome because I trust Corey, so therefore there's the transference of trust and credibility through the introduction.
Absolutely. And that's the important thing right there, the trust. That
Yep,
is everything. And
100%.
and like you, yeah, we've all received those introductions. I mean, I have been a connector and conduit of trust for 21 years now.
Mm.
And people, like a lot of people, a lot of entrepreneurs, they want to try to help me out too and stuff. And so, well, Kevin, let me make an introduction for you.
Mhm.
And they'll send an email and say, hey, Kevin, meet Joe. You guys are two really great guys doing awesome stuff, and you should connect. And I always appreciate the effort,
Yeah.
but without context there,
Yep.
it's probably not going to go very far. Versus if we just set a little bit of context and say why we're connecting somebody, as Corey did, it makes all the difference in the world and
Yeah,
stuff.
sure does.
Yeah. So, well, what I want to do is I want to just start talking with you, and let's start by talking about. And if you want to, when somebody asks me what I do, my first response is, well, first and foremost, I'm a husband and father to 7 kids, and grandpa to currently 6 grandkids, and right now we got one coming in March. We got a
Holy
new
bananas,
grandbaby.
man.
Yeah. And so that's
Wow.
my and then I'll talk about the business piece and stuff. But I want to just talk with you about what you do and who you serve, and also what inspires you about that. And if you want to share anything personal to kind of break the ice too, that's totally cool too. So
Um, well, my wife Christine and I, we've been married for 32 years.
wow, congratulations, that's
Thank you.
awesome.
Yeah. And we have a beautiful daughter, Caitlin, who is now a freshman in college.
Okay.
Which is certainly a new chapter for all of us.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because if I had $1 for every time, a friend or a family member or somebody says, "Oh, you're going to be empty nesting again," what's that going to be like? And I'm like, Christine and I were married for 14 years before we had Caitlin, so I think we're going to be okay. Um, and as if like spending time with your spouse again is some sort of bad trade-off. But
Yeah.
but anyway, so. And, I come from a long line of entrepreneurs. I own Predictive ROI today, and I started back in 2009, and blessed and privileged to be one of the leaders inside the business. We have a team of 25, actually 26, I guess, as of yesterday.
Wow.
And it's a wonderful privilege, and an honor to be part of a team that truly cares about one another. I know there's lots of companies that sort of give lip service to, what makes us great is our people, and I'm really proud of the fact that our team actually supports and cares, and we use the word of love inside our business, and how they protect each other, how they make sure that nothing is dropped, and all of that, and are really truly good people, and our clients see that, and that's just so much fun. We travel together, we hang out together, we have fun together, we laugh and cry together, and that's just a really wonderful thing. From a business perspective, Predictive is an agency that supports other agencies. And so, our goal is to help agencies sell more of what they do. So we're business development, sales, operations experts. It's one thing to sell a thing, and then it's another thing to actually be able to deliver the thing.
That's right.
And so we help agencies walk that path, um, and drive biz dev. So anyway, that's obviously at a high level, but that is what we do today, and we feel very, very privileged and honored to walk alongside our clients and do that, and then be able to teach everything that we do in full transparency to all of the agencies in our community. And it is not lost on us how that's an honor and a privilege to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Stephen, how did you get into even doing this work to begin with? How did you even become in this, like running an agency?
Yeah, it was, I think probably similar to many of the people that you have interviewed is sort of well, I kind of fell into that. I grew up inside restaurants and catering businesses. My
Okay.
aunts, my uncles, my mom, all owned food service businesses, and I thought for the longest time that I too was going to own a restaurant at some point.
Okay.
But I was not the best high school student. And a few years ago, I said to my mom, Mom, I graduated 272 out of 300. And she's like, that's amazing. And I'm like, no, I think you got your percentiles backwards. And so candidly, I didn't have a whole lot of options. I grew up in Canton, Ohio. It's not like I was going to send off my transcript to Ohio State and they're going to be like, "You're the next Buckeye," or the University of Akron or anywhere, because I was so inept academically, and I'm not trying to be self-deprecating. That's just the reality. And so I knew that if I was going to go to college, it was going to be a different path. And also, I wanted to serve, and I so my junior year in high school, I decided to join the United States Air Force,
Okay.
and so I wanted a definitive path as quickly as possible, and so I joined the delayed enlistment program. So I spent 4 years in the Air Force, and during that time, I spent that time working inside nuclear missile silos in the prairies of South Dakota,
Wow.
and that taught me the power of troubleshooting very quickly, and then the power of system design. And then I had this opportunity to I was working at Red Lobster part-time, oddly enough, and I wanted to become a manager inside Red Lobster. And they're like, well, that's not going to happen unless you have marketing experience. I'm like, huh, well, where can I get marketing experience? Oh, I know. I'll go work for free at an advertising agency in Rapid City.
Mhm.
And so I went to a number of them. They're like, yeah, no. Thank you, but no. You're greener than green. Whatever is to the left of green, that's where you're at. Um, and so I'm like, okay. But there was an agency in town. I kept on calling. There was an agency in town, Robert Sharp and Associates, and praise God, they said, okay, we're not going to give you any money, and if you work like crazy for 3 months, we might give you a part-time job. And I'm like, giddy up. I'll take those chances. And so I did, and fell in love with the agency business. And that was,
Wow.
32 years ago.
Wow. Wow. That's an awesome story right there. And that you too gave 3 months of your time and
Hmm.
effort to them,
Hmm.
and just so you could have the experience of doing that.
Right. And I
And
competed against two other guys who were also unpaid interns. And
okay.
I'm like, there's no way I'm not winning this. Like I'll stuff these two dudes in a dumpster and I am going to win this competition. I mean, it's a
Uh-huh.
foregone conclusion anyway, but all joking aside, it was a very friendly competition. But you know, I was committed. There was no way I was not winning.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. There's so many what's the right word I'm looking for? So many similarities between your experience and my experience in growing
Ooh,
up. 'Cause I too, I joined the military, the army, right out of high school for four
hoorah,
years,
hoorah.
and I had an experience in the army. I'm not going to go into it now, but I had an experience in the army that really taught me the value and the importance of right relationships. And it's like
Amen.
I've always remembered that. And after I got out of the army. I was trying to get a job on a fishing boat. I live in Seattle area here, and I went down to Fisherman's Terminal trying to get a job on a fishing boat. And the captains, they don't hire off the dock because they're all like, "You have no idea what you're getting yourself into."
Right.
And
And
but
how
this
dangerous it is if you're not
and
experienced.
yes. And this one guy, John Waddell, he ended up taking my number and a couple of days later called me back and asked me how quick I could be there to the boat. And I said, "Man, I could be there inside of 2 hours." He said, "All right, pack your stuff and get on down here. Come
Wow.
up, come up to the wheelhouse to see me." And when I got there, he told me, he said, "Kevin, I've never done this before." And he said, "I am just praying you don't let me down." and
Please don't die and make us go search for you if you
Yeah,
fall overboard.
right. And he's like, "You are in for an experience." He's like, "You are going to work the hardest you have ever worked in your life." But
Mhm.
he's like, "You shared some stuff with me that I think you've got what it takes." And he's like, "We'll both find out soon enough if we made the right decision." And in my mind, it was kind of like what you talked about, these two guys. I'm going to
Mhm.
stuff these guys in a dumpster. I was like, I looked at that conversation with John and I'm like, challenge accepted. I am not going to let this guy down. I'm going to bust my butt for this guy. And besides that, I don't want none of the other guys on the boat saying that guy Kevin don't pull his weight, you
That's
know.
right.
And I ended up working up in Alaska for the next 7 years doing
Wow.
what kind of work. And so, and with the goal of saving up money to start my own business. And that first year, well, the first 10 months, I stayed up there 10 months straight. And that was 1988. So I would have been 23 years old. And I came home with a little over $110,000. That was after taxes and after everything.
Wow.
And I definitely worked for that. I don't even I shudder to think what my hourly wage actually was because you worked a lot of hours. And so, but I'll tell you, at 23 years old, that was a chunk of change.
Of course it was.
And it was a good lesson. It was a good lesson, and yeah, and I was getting half of what all the other guys on the boat because I was the greenhorn. That's what they call the new guy is the greenhorn.
Mhm.
You don't get paid what everybody else gets paid. And so, but you know what? Looking back for you and looking back for me, it all played out. It all panned out, and it was all worth it, wasn't it?
100%.
Yeah, yeah. So, what inspires you most about the work that you get to do, Stephen?
I think what inspires me the most about it is um there's something special when you know that the work that you and team did alongside another person's team changes the trajectory of that, in our world, agency. Going from the famine of biz dev to the feast of biz dev so that they can really start to see and imagine new possibilities. Like oh gosh, well now that we've got that problem solved, geez, we can invest in this thing or go to that thing or add these two new people or whatever. So going from feeling maybe a lack of hope or desperation or something, and then being part of the process that removes that and replaces it with hope and confidence and structure and a sales pipeline that that you can actually depend upon. That's a really cool thing, knowing that you got to contribute to that, and then it changes the course of that agency over the foreseeable future, and in a particular, the owner and maybe the leaders and the teammates. That's a beautiful thing when that happens.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Wow. Yeah, you're right. I mean, being able to give people hope and just kind of show them that path that, you've already had experience taking other people down this path.
Yep.
And you just know that when you connect with the right people, you're like, "Oh yeah, this is the kind of person that I can really pour my God-given gifts and abilities into and stuff, you
Yeah.
know." And and that's really, really awesome.
Mhm.
So, where do you see what's your vision for the company going forward, Stephen?
Well, a couple of things. So there's um, certainly we have our series of business goals and what we want to do and the number of agencies that we want to be able to serve and those sort of like standard things, right? And you can see that behind me up on the wall, that mountain with the different um, sort of camps along the way. We call that our Everest mission. And so there's certainly those things. However, I guess maybe more importantly, I mean, those things are important to accomplish because then they provide me as well as my fellow owners with the revenue, the profit, I guess I should say, with what we really want to do as far as like making impact and whatnot. So my business partner and I were talking about this the other day, and I said, as I think about the things that I want to be able to do over the next several years, I'm 53. I'm like, I want to build 100 churches. And he's
Uh-huh.
like, well, okay, well, and he's like, and I thought he said, I thought that kids in college and all of that funding college was part of your thing, and I said it still is, absolutely, without a doubt, which will hook into the relationship piece when you and I talk about that, but. Because I believe that education is a great equalizer. That if you want to change somebody's trajectory, then give them education. And so anyway, when I think about like where I want predictive to go, sure, there's all the business metrics and all of those things we've got planned and mapped out and whatnot. The why behind that is because I want to build 100 churches and I want to put a bunch of kids through college.
Yeah. Wow. What an awesome vision.
Mhm.
I love talking with entrepreneurs about their vision because it's just so inspiring to hear them share it and stuff, And then
Amen.
then I just start default thinking to who do I know that might be able to help with that, It's because that's just where my brain goes. And it just did that, and so we can talk about that later. But I just
Awesome.
and well, okay, so I'm going to switch gears a little bit, not much, but just a little, and so I'm going to reiterate this question for the benefit of our listeners. So,
Okay.
Stephen, have you ever been introduced to a person or persons who completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons? And I'm just really excited to hear your story and your experience around this topic of relationships.
Yeah, I absolutely have. Um, his name is Peter Marinitis.
Okay,
And is it okay if I share a little bit about Peter's story and then how that
absolutely.
impacted me? Is that all right? Okay,
Whatever you
so
feel led to share. Yes.
all right. Um, Peter was born in 1902 in Istanbul, Turkey. And at the ripe old age of 8, when he was in third grade, he had to drop out of school and take care of his mom and dad. or excuse me, his mom and his two younger siblings. And the reason being is because his dad, his father, was killed and murdered on the streets of Istanbul because at the time the Ottoman Empire sanctioned the killing of Greeks and Armenians and other ethnicities if they weren't Turkish. And so Peter's father was killed because he was Greek. And so now Peter, at the ripe old age of 8, was the man of the house. And so it became his job to drop out of school to be the breadwinner at 8. And he did with a smile on his face. And he worked hard and for the next 10 years dreamed of how can I put myself in the right position to be able to go to the United States when I'm 18, go to the United States, make something of myself, and take care of my family at the same time.
Yeah.
So, as fortune would have it for Peter at 18, so now fast forward, this is now 1920. He got his opportunity to come to the United States, and he did, and hopped on the boat and came here and came to the United States without any sort of LinkedIn profile or some sort of massive social network, right? Couldn't speak the language and had $10 in his pocket
Wow.
and made his way to Canton, Ohio, because that's where a lot of the Greeks were going. And so he followed the herd and decided to start washing dishes and cutting vegetables at a downtown Canton, Ohio restaurant because he wanted to be a restaurateur, but he had no money. But what he did have were skills. And
Mhm.
so he traded his skills for money, just like you did in Alaska. And he saved all his money. And 6 years later, after having nothing and couldn't speak the language 6 years prior, he opened his own restaurant in downtown Canton, Ohio called The Ideal. And you see a photo of that behind me. And that is Peter standing at his lunch counter at the Ideal restaurant where he, made everything from scratch and had a little lunch counter and, business people would come in and order, the fresh food and delicious and all of that. Except it wasn't great from a business planning perspective because just a few years later, the Depression hit.
Okay.
And, he married the love of his life and they had four amazing kids along the way. Um, but he gave away more soup than he ever sold during the Depression. Fast forward many years later, his son Bill, who also then became a restaurateur, asked him, "Hey, Pop, why is it that during the Depression you gave away more soup than you ever sold?" And he looked at his son and said, I know that Jesus is coming back someday. I don't know what he's going to look like, so I'm just going to be good to everybody. And his entire business plan, Peter's entire business plan, was if you take care of your customer, they will take care of you.
Yeah.
And he was right.
Yeah.
And so I had the privilege of calling Peter Papu, which is grandfather for Greek in Greek. Um, he came here and took all of the risk. My family immigrated here from Greece and Turkey, as you heard me say about Istanbul. And so for 14 years of my life, he passed away when I was a freshman in high school.
Hey.
But for 14 years, he showed me through proof and evidence of what it meant to be a good person, to take care of the people around you, what it meant to sacrifice for your family, what it meant to build long-lasting friendships. And I saw that evidence. I didn't hear somebody just talk about it.
Yeah.
I saw somebody live it.
Yeah.
And so, to answer your question, Peter Marinitis is my most impactful mentor through proof, evidence, and everything that he taught to me.
Yeah. Wow. What an amazing story.
Mm.
And wow, wow, wow. So I'm just sitting here taking this all in right now and just trying to figure out what I want my next question to be.
Mm.
And so um having a role model like that. I mean, I just, man, that's just really, really amazing. I mean, how did your relationship with him and just so you were how old when he passed away?
I was 14, but
14. Okay.
so what I should also say is that I'm a firm believer that when my great grandfather died on the streets of Istanbul because he was Greek,
Uh-huh.
I believe that in that instant, the DNA of our family changed.
Okay.
In that moment, we became entrepreneurs. Now, all of us didn't exist yet. We hadn't been born yet, but
Mhm.
Pop had. And in that moment, at 8, he became the breadwinner.
Mhm.
And then his 4 kids all became business owners, restaurateurs.
Mhm.
I'm biased because this is my uncle, my 2 aunts, and my mom. And the 10 grandkids, we all became business owners. My cousins,
Wow.
my fellow 9 first cousins,
Yeah.
we've all become business owners. So I believe that in that moment
Yeah.
that my great grandfather was murdered in Istanbul, everything downstream changed.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that is like unheard of, such a high percentage of the family becoming entrepreneurs because of that, you know. Um, wow, wow. So you have a little bit different, it's interesting. When I started my first business, my 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 story of starting my first business isn't nearly as inspiring, Steve. You know, after 7 years of working as a commercial fisherman, almost losing my life in '95 by we got hit with a rogue wave that threw me across the boat and in fact, that's this scar on my chin is from that. I smacked into the railing with my face,
Oh
and
my
it cut my
gosh.
chin up, knocked my teeth out, and and after that trip, I decided, okay, you've saved up enough money, and it's time to make the shift, and but I had met this guy in Seattle
Mhm.
and he had a carpet cleaning and restoration business and it looked like he did pretty good and I thought, well, gosh, if he could do this, so can I. And that
Sure.
was my whole thing for starting my first business. And I just thought, oh, I just thought I can make money doing that. And that's a whole different thing. You going into starting your first business. So for you, even when you were starting your first, what was going through your mind at that time because of this experience that you just shared with us?
I think so. I'll rewind for just a second, then
Okay.
I'll get to that piece. But so oddly, because I shared with you how poorly I performed as a high school student,
Mhm.
and now fast forward, education is incredibly important to me. Um, so even though my papu, which is grandfather in Greek, even though Pop had a third grade education, he was one of the smartest people I've ever known. He never ever stopped learning. He was always reading something and consuming something. He had this fervor for education and he was incredibly intelligent, even though he didn't have a quote unquote formal education.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's why part of this goal is, to be able to put as many kids as I possibly can through college in honor of something that he wasn't able to do. So once I got my stuff straight and I was in the service, the Air Force was great for me. Not only was it the discipline and structure that I needed, but I got 4 college degrees out of it.
Yeah. Wow.
And it was through those moments of like, oh, this is why education is super important. And so the first when I became an owner in the first business that I ever owned, I became a partner inside an advertising agency, not Robert Sharp and Associates, but a different one.
Okay.
And I said to the president of the agency, At the time, I'm like, I want to be an owner in this business. He's like, oh, okay. And I'm like, and I want to do in 5 years. He's like, oh, okay. And I worked hard and I badgered him. And three years later, I had accomplished my goal.
Wow. Wow.
And so, going back to Pop for a second, the reason why that photo of him is framed on the back wall and then tying that into the partner story is because I like to feel like there's a level of tenacity and discipline in the work that I do because I owe that to him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Had he not taken the risks, had he not been on the boat, had he not come to a foreign country, had he not, swum upstream against having no money, couldn't speak the language, had he not taken all of those risks, had he not given away more soup than he ever sold through the Great Depression,
Yeah.
I have the privilege and honor to get to do what I do every day because he took those risks along with other members of my family.
Yeah.
Right? My grandmother did not have an easy path to this country either. She was born on the island of Evia, just off the coast of Athens.
Okay.
And her struggle here was horrendous too. So had my family not taken those risks, so at night when it's late and I'm tired and I want to go to bed, I think, I think I can send one more email.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. What's an example of a situation where you personally you got to make a really big impact
Mm.
and maybe in the moment it even surprised you a little bit, but you also know that would have never been possible if not for the relationship with this man in your life.
Well, okay. Um, you're so I can certainly answer the question, but you're what comes to mind is actually something I've never shared publicly before.
Wow.
Um, so hence sort of the hesitancy in my voice. Um, so about 10 years ago, mm, closer to probably about 15 years ago, when Caitlin was in elementary school, again, because education is super important to me. When my daughter was in elementary school that's attached to our church, where she went pre-K to eighth, and then she went to Luther High School here in Onalaska, Wisconsin. It was back to school night. We were coming back to school, and so all the parents and the kids and whatnot were in the sanctuary, and like the pastors and the principal and the teachers. Hey, these are the new teachers this year, that kind of stuff, right? And then the next day or something was the first day of school. Anyway, so we're sitting there, and the principal, who unfortunately is no longer with us, he has since passed, but Bob stood up and was welcoming everybody, and everybody loved Bob. He was just amazing. Unfortunately, passed away from pancreatic cancer a few years after he retired, but he was an amazing, amazing principal. And so he's welcoming everybody back. And I'm sitting there in the pew, and I just had this feeling. I'm like, as I look around all the families, and I'm feeling really blessed at the opportunity because we had just started Predictive, and I was still teaching at the University of Wisconsin at the La Crosse campus, and I was just feeling very, very blessed and fortunate at the moment. And so as I thought, I was like, as I was looking out at all the other families, I thought, I wonder if there's anybody here who's struggling to pay the tuition for their kid, for their child to attend this really amazing school. I felt so privileged that we could have Caitlin in this school. So anyway, we leave and we drive off. And I said that to Christine, my wife, and I said, I wonder. And she goes, and I had, and Bob, I would say, was a friend. And she goes, why don't you just call Bob and ask? I said, all right. So the next day I was at the university and I called Bob and I said, shared what I just shared with you, Kevin. And he said, It's funny you should ask. And I said, why? And he said, well, at the end, this family came up to me and said, Bob, I don't know how we're going to do it. Our business is failing. It's going to make me cry again. You're like that ESPN interview person, that made people cry. Anyway, and he said, they are struggling to make ends meet, and they're going to have to take the kids out of school because they just can't afford it. I said, okay, how much do they owe? Because they owed some back tuition, not the current year going forward, but they just owed some back tuition. So anyway, he called me back. He goes, I don't know, I'll have to check. And so he called me back and said, it's $5,186. I said, I will bring you a check today. And about a month or so later, and I said, but the deal is, and this is where I'm sort of like violating the promise that I held Bob to. I said, I don't want the pastors to know. I don't want the family to know. I don't want anyone to know. And so this is literally the first time I've ever talked about this publicly. And and he's like, okay. And so I took that to him. And then about a month later, he gave me this letter. And it was the to whom this may concern kind of thing, right? Because they didn't know who we were. And it just went on and on about how grateful they were and how important it was to keep the kids in St. Paul's. And Christine and I read that. We're standing in our kitchen and we're crying. And I said, we need to do more of that. And so we did.
Yeah.
Um, because I believe that education is a great equalizer and it's really important.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so well, for one, I thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
Um, it's interesting. 12 years ago, I had a conversation with a good friend of mine, Jesse, and it just really shifted my take on this whole giving and receiving thing.
Mm.
And I've always been really great at giving to others. And I love the feeling that comes to just giving to somebody who really appreciates it, whether they know it was us or not,
Right.
And but for most of my life, I wasn't very good at receiving, and God forbid that I would like ask anybody for what I wanted, because I was like, I don't want to bother them, I don't want to inconvenience them, or maybe in that thought back, man, well, what would they think of me if they knew I was going through that, you know, and and Jesse just shared some insight with me, and he's like, and so we were talking about that. And he's like, Kevin, what does that feel like when you give to somebody who just really appreciates it? And I'm just like, man, I was like, that's the most amazing feeling in the world. I said, I don't know a better feeling than that.
Mhm.
And he's like, right? And he's like, but Kevin, he's like, do you realize that by you kind of showing up the way you are, you give to others, but you don't let other people give to you? He's like, you're depriving them from having that feeling that you just told me was the best feeling ever.
Mhm.
He's like, and I'm like, you know what? I never looked at it like that. And so ever since, that was 12 years ago. Actually, it was 2012, so it was 13 years ago. I've just been having this experiment ever since. How much can I open myself up to receiving? Knowing that, you know what? The more I can receive, the more I can give. you know, and I've been able to have a lot of experiences like that too. We started a family foundation years ago, and we do a lot of really cool stuff through our foundation. What's really cool about it is our 7 kids. Every year at Christmas, we just give them the debit card for the family foundation account, and they just go and they just choose a local family. They either find that family through the food bank or through a church or what have you, and they just go and visit with that family, and they find out what that family needs, what they need for their kids or whatever, what those kids would also like. And we just like pour into that family for the holidays and stuff. And my kids go do it. They talked with the family. They then go shopping. They get the gifts. They get food for Christmas. They get all of that, and then they go deliver.
Wow.
And the first year we started doing that years ago, my oldest daughter told me, she goes, Dad, she goes, that was so amazing. She goes, I wish I could just do that all the time. you know, and it's just given them such a heart for service, and it's been such an amazing experience, and that and we've got this orphanage down in Jamaica, the Blossom Garden Orphanage that we've been supporting for years, and we go down there and we take trips and go hang out with the kids, and they call it White People Day when we come there. So and we just go hang out with the kids. They're we're pretty well taken care of there, but the people on staff, they're just busy taking care of them and taking care, and so they don't get to just hang out and just
Right.
spend time with them. And
Right.
so people like us come in and we get to do that with them.
Yeah.
And we've been doing that since my son Brock is 17 now. The first time we took a trip to that orphanage, he was 3. And I've got a picture of him with all the other kids, and he's the only white kid in the bunch, and he is completely oblivious to that fact. He's just having fun hanging out with all the other kids. And, so, and now, we take their friends from school. They'll want to go on trips with us, and we'll just take them along. And their parents are like, "You don't want any money?" I'm like, "Nah." I was like, "Well, we got them covered. We got them covered." And when those kids go and those kids have that experience, they come back and their parents are like, wow, because now they've got context and they've got like, wow, they realize, man, we've got it really good here. And things are way different in Jamaica. and so, and, uh, and so and you're right. I mean, I that really feeds my soul, and just that story that you shared. And I'm like, I love surrounding myself by just entrepreneurs who just have big hearts for giving and stuff, and because we are the ones who are equipped to be able to do that and make a real difference.
Yep.
And
100%.
yeah. Well, Stephen, for anybody who might be listening to this and thinking, man, Kevin, I really like Steven. I love who he is. I love how he shows up. And maybe there's also people thinking like, you know what? I might like to talk with Steven about our thing, or maybe I know somebody else that I might want to connect Steven with. Any resources, any website info we can share with folks?
I think like business wise, you can certainly find us at predictiveroi.com. So predictiveroi.com. If somebody wants to connect with me personally, then LinkedIn is the
Okay.
best source for that. And it's Stephen. My last name is spelled Woessner, or is Woessner. My last name is spelled Woess, as in Sierra Sierra, NER. So you can find me on LinkedIn and send me a connection request, and happy to accept it. And but thank you very much for that.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Well, thank you so much, Stephen, for taking the time to have this conversation today. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you. And I'm looking forward to sharing this with a lot of other entrepreneurs. So thanks so much.
Thanks, Kevin.